Yeah, well, this is just another sign that they are expecting operations to intensify and, if anything, not calm down or not de-escalate in the coming days. That notice came through from the State Department urging all American citizens, residents of a huge number of Middle Eastern countries, pretty much all of them, to leave the region. And of course, that becomes very difficult and challenging in an environment where key airports in the region continue to be non-operational. The airspace is still closed. It's estimated that as many as 4,000 flights a day have not been operated or been canceled. And many of these airlines are running with very, very low, with a low capacity of something like 5% for just key essential flights here. So it is very difficult for these residents and citizens to leave, but all the signals point to the fact that the war, at least for the time being, will not be de-escalated in the coming days.
Joumana, thank you so much. Joumana Bercetche there with the very latest from the Middle East. Now, let's bring in our panel. With me here, Bloomberg opinion columnist Mark Champion, Themos Fitakis, Global Head of FX Strategy and EM Macro Strategy at Barclays. And joining us from Dubai is Anthony De Paula, Bloomberg's Middle East Energy Markets reporter. So thank you all for joining us. Anthony, let's start off with you. It's very clear that global energy markets have been upended by this war. Is the biggest fear that the Strait of Hormuz really gets closed and so oil tankers can't go? Or is it that Iran seems to be targeting by proxy also energy infrastructure around the Gulf?
Yeah, good morning, Francine. For the moment, clearly the issue is Hormuz, and it's effectively closed because ships are really not transiting there. We've seen vessels getting blocked up inside the Gulf, not able to leave, and then other ones waiting outside of Hormuz around the UAE port of Fujairah and other areas trying to come in. Plus, we've seen a couple of vessels that have been hit around those waiting areas. So that's another concern for shippers. So shippers are really avoiding that area. That creates a knock-on effect inside the Persian Gulf at a lot of these refineries and oil production facilities, is that when the ships aren't coming in, there's no one to pick up the crude oil that needs to be exported or the products. So it can't get out and it can't get to the customers, and then it's building up in the facilities there. So that takes away, of course, the concern is around the facilities, whether those get hit and get damaged, because when things do open up, those won't be able to come straight back into the market and begin resupplying the market, Francine.
And Mark, what exactly is the strategy of Iran right now? So first of all, the force is kind of unmatched to what we've seen in previous conflicts. Is it to try and get the Gulf states to put pressure on Donald Trump to finish the war quickly, or is it really spreading chaos across energy markets?
Well, I think it's going to be both those things. The Iranians are fully aware that the question is time. They have a certain number of missiles and launchers that they can use, and every time they take a launcher out to fire a missile, it's at risk. They're being degraded, so they don't know how long that will work. This kind of adding to that is the fact that the first time around last summer, when they had this a previous Israeli-U.S. attack to deal with, the Iranians fired in large volleys their most sophisticated missiles and so on right at the beginning, and then quickly realized that they had wasted a lot. Most of that got shot down. I mean, it was only later in the 12 days that they started to get through because they had saturated defenses. So this time around, they're conserving their their more capable missiles, using a lot of drones and older rockets. So it's a question of time, and they don't know how much time they have. Americans don't know how much time they have. So what they're trying to do is pressure the Americans via the Gulf states because they had saturated defenses. So this time around, they're conserving their more capable missiles, using a lot of drones and older rockets. So it's a question of time, and they don't know how much time they have. Americans don't know how much time they have. So what they're trying to do is pressure the Americans via the Gulf states because they had saturated defenses. So this time around, they're conserving their more capable missiles, using a lot of drones and older rockets. So it's a question of time, and they don't know how much time they have. And if you know that what's being sent at you is drones, and that later on you will get more ballistic missiles because that's what's being conserved, then you really don't want to use your Patriots, because Patriots can bring down ballistic missiles. You know, a lot of things can bring down drones. So you may just have to let drones through.
Themos, is the market behaving the way it should, given the severity of this, or is it still underpricing certain risks?
I mean, if we keep the Straits of Hormuz closed or shut for a couple of weeks, I don't think we're priced yet, either in terms of commodity prices or in terms of the implication of higher commodity price across bonds and equity markets on this front, basically.
But, I mean, the Strait of Hormuz, and again, there's almost a self-imposed moratorium, is that a lot of ships just won't go that way.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's that. But there's a sense that there's risk going through that. So, and it is also not an endless conflict in that sense. So there's pressure even from the Chinese for that passage to become safe again. So it's not an endless. That's probably why the market is not going all the way as far as to price 3 or 4 weeks of a blocked passage from there. But if that risk materializes, we're not priced fully for that.
Anthony, I mean, you look at oil, it's up. European gas was up 34% because of this Qatar LNG shutdown. Is Europe actually the region that has the most to lose in this?
Yeah, well, Europe really depends on LNG imports. They depend a lot on the U.S. imports, and there are Qatari exports going to Europe. But when those exports get shut off, that's going to bring up the prices all over the place, because a lot of those cargoes that do go to Asia, those Asian buyers there are going to draw on some of the U.S. cargoes and trying to get those. So it's going to bring up those prices all over the place. And we did see that major price reaction on European gas because we did see that capacity, the LNG capacity, actually taken offline. So far on the oil front, we haven't seen that spike as high as some people have thought, because we haven't seen the real interruption or damage to capacity. So traders still have that kind of wait and see attitude. Are we going to see the Hormuz open up a little bit? And if we do quickly, then we've still got the capacity. So on oil, they're still waiting a little bit to see actual impacts on capacity and production. Whereas on gas, we've seen that impact. We've seen the impact of what the shutoff of really one of the top 3 producers in the world has done. So that's really put markets into turmoil, Francine.
And Themos, I mean, because there's no warrants, no end in sight of this war, you really see expectations of inflation going up. Is that, again, through the right lens? Because, a war could, I don't know whether we're talking about a couple of months, a couple of years, or how you view that and the impact it has on inflation and therefore, what central bank reaction function.
I think the markets are, particularly the bond markets, are focused on inflation here now. I'm not sure that this is the most pressing angle. We have been through bigger terms of trade, bigger price shocks. We've had tariff shocks. We have had natural gas prices go to 300. There has been, the economies have seen through these shocks in a bigger way. But there are 2 main angles here that I think the market is trying to also oscillate around. The first one is, don't forget, we entered this situation, the market selling U.S. assets and buying European assets, diversifying away. Now it is reminded of the big vulnerabilities that the European continent has in terms of reliance to energy from the most dangerous locations on the planet. The other angle here is that obviously when that resolves, when the situation resolves, we could be also in a better place. So the market is trying to oscillate between what they want to buy for a resolution and where they want to get insurance for an energy shock hitting the hardest.
Mark, is there an off-ramp for the U.S.?
That's going to be tough. So there was this very interesting exchange, over yesterday, the day before, where President Trump said, well, the Iranians already reached out to us to talk. It was supposedly Larijani, the head of the National Security Council in Iran, who is emerging as, for now, the most important leader in Iran. And he said, we are not talking to the Americans. He has to say that. I mean, if you look at the history of what happened and led to this war, multiple times when they got into talks with the Americans struck when they were supposed to go and negotiate. Of course, also the JCPOA, which the Americans collapsed, in 2018. So, he has to say this. He represents the hardline regime. The Iranians know that they're in a difficult position. They need an exit. Someone is going to have to take the lead, and I suspect the way that this will ultimately work, he has to say this. He represents the hardline regime, the Iranians know that they're in a difficult position. They need an exit. Someone is going to have to take the lead, and I suspect the way that this will ultimately work. He has to say this. He represents the hardline regime, the Iranians know that they're in a difficult position. They need an exit, someone is going to have to take the lead, and I suspect the way that this will ultimately work.
Is it at all costs getting rid of this regime?
This is the difficult part, right? If you have if you think through the logic of this campaign militarily, how it should work out, it should be, 4 to 6 weeks of intense bombing to destroy. They've already achieved their superiority. That was number one. Then they need to, destroy all the kind of, the missile, the means of response that Iran has. Then they can move on to, just flying drones all over the country and, taking out Basij or IRGC as they build barricades and so on, and show to Iranians that if you come out, we will be your Air Force. That is a long process, and it involves a lot of question marks. And that, I think, is why you see this kind of utter confusion from Rubio, etc., as to why we're there and what we're trying to achieve. You have, Hegseth and Trump saying, well, we're not ruling out boots on the ground. There is no way that the U.S. is putting boots on the ground, but they need to say this stuff to show that they have escalation dominance all the way.
And Anthony, on China, China buys so much of this Iranian crude. They kind of weighed in saying, they've urged all sides to ensure the safe passage of ships through Hormuz. Is there anything else that China can do to put pressure on either side?
Pretty much everyone in the Gulf depends on China as their main buyer, and China really has a stake there that the oil continues flowing. They had discussed with Saudis issues around Bab el-Mandeb before. They're discussing with the Iranians, as we understand, around Hormuz right now. The only thing they can really do is probably keep that pressure there. But again, this is a key transit route for them, not only for the oil, but also, as we said, the LNG. And it will be important for them that infrastructure remains working, remains functional, so that once this war is finished, those exports are continuing to flow and able to flow to them. The Chinese have a huge strategic reserve that they've been building up over the past several years, and that's been helping prop up some of the oil prices, even as we've seen excess production in the market. So they should be good for some reserves, but they really want that waterway open and continuing to flow. Francine.
All right, thank you all for a terrific briefing. Bloomberg opinion columnist Mark Champion, Anthony DePaola, our Middle East energy markets reporter, and Themos Fotakis, global head of FX strategy and EM macro strategy at Barclays. Coming up, the UK Chancellor seeks to keep her spring statement a low-key affair. We'll look ahead to her update on the state of the UK economy. That's next, and this is Bloomberg.
U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers Jobs Day like Bloomberg.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories. I'm Sherrian in Tokyo.
And I'm Heidi Stroud-Watts here in Sydney, where the trading day begins. We're here in the center of all the action to get you set up with the numbers, news and knowledge you need for the day ahead.
The demand is indeed recovering.
We've been waiting for this moment.
The opportunity of a century.
Join us on Bloomberg The Asia Trade. Weekdays only on Bloomberg TV. Context changes everything.
It's the world's second largest economy with a growing influence in global affairs. Bloomberg The China Show brings you the unmatched expertise you need to keep track of.
We've been waiting for this moment.
The opportunity of a century.
Join us on Bloomberg The Asia Trade. Weekdays only on Bloomberg TV.
Savings right now.
It's already a different game.
Bloomberg The China Show. Weekdays around the world, right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Astonishing day for US technology.
Shaping the region's technology ecosystem.
Asia's biggest tech news and innovation.
Weekdays around.
Rachel Reeves will deliver an update on the state of the UK economy later today, focusing on the government's economic plan for Britain. Well, Bloomberg's Lizzie Burden joins us from Westminster. Lizzie, what, if anything, is Reeves expected to announce?
Well, Francine, this is the first chance the Chancellor will have to respond to the economic implications of the US-Iran war, as you've been discussing the impact on energy markets. And already we've seen traders paring bets on Bank of England rate cuts, so they only see 1 quarter-point cut this year. So the Chancellor is expected to frame this as underscoring the need for fiscal stability. But we were already expecting it to be a policy-light affair. There's a huge spotlight on whether the Labour Party is going to lurch to the left after that by-election defeat in Manchester last week, but we're not expecting her to make any major announcements on tax and spend when it comes, for example, to defence spending or how to fix unemployment. She's expected to punt all of that to the autumn. Now, we are going to get the latest growth forecasts from the Office for Budget Responsibility. We'll be able to calculate how much headroom she has against her fiscal rules. It was £9.9 billion. It went up to £20 billion. It's expected to stay there. And our colleagues report that she's had a £22 billion windfall from stronger than expected cash tax receipts and lower debt interest payments. That should help the Debt Management Office to slash gilt sales, gilt issuance, I should say, to the lowest in 3 years. And that should be good for gilt yields.
Lizzie, thanks so much. Lizzie Burden there outside, Abingdon Green in Westminster. Now, for more, we're joined by Ruth Curtis, Chief Executive of the Resolution Foundation. Thank you for joining us, as always.
Thanks very much.
We started by saying the Chancellor wanted a low-key affair. This is certainly what she got, but it doesn't make the economy any better.
No, and what we'll get today are these forecasts from the Office for Budget Responsibility, which won't take account of everything that's happening in the Middle East. And so, unfortunately, will look quite out of date already. I think the Chancellor was probably hoping to deliver a positive message today. Inflation coming in lower than expected, government focused on the cost of living. But, of course, these changes in gas and oil prices blow a hole right through that.
Households are cautious. If you look at the labour market, it's okay, but it's not great. What do you worry about the most?
Yeah, I worry about the labour market a lot. So unemployment has come in higher than the OBR expected just in November, and we've seen youth unemployment rise to higher than the European average. I think it's good for the Chancellor not to be making huge tax and spending announcements, but there are some issues in the economy where arguably today is a missed opportunity.
If you were the Chancellor, what would you do actually and again, I've heard everything like, look, it just needs to be more radical. People need to feel a little bit better about everything that's going on. Otherwise, this growth will remain lackluster.
Yeah, so I think certainly when we talk to businesses, we've heard that it is good that this has not been an event with loads of speculation, that there are some signs of kind of a revival of confidence that this might support. But on things like unemployment, she's got a youth jobs guarantee, but a young person has to be unemployed for 18 months to qualify for that. She could reduce that to 6 months today, but I don't think she will.
Ruth, this is not a government that's strong by any means or stretch of the imagination. Does that impact policy?
Well, I think what it certainly impacts is policy uncertainty. So this Parliament has been actually the highest of any of the last 7 for policy uncertainty. And when you think about everything that's happened over the last decades, that's quite extraordinary. So the Chancellor's delivering a low-key event. She wants to persuade people that that's because tax and spending plans are stable. But obviously with political turmoil, that's hard for her to guarantee.
Can she do? There's only so much, given the fiscal constraint. There's only so much actually she can play around with.
Yeah, and we're expecting headroom to come in broadly the same as the 22 billion she had in the autumn. That was a big rise on what she had before, but it's, you know, about the average move that you see in forecasts of this kind, so it's not at all money to burn.
I mean, is there one thing that would change the fortune? I mean, it's not only one thing, but I don't know if it's a positive news on, you know, the labour market or how the UK deals with AI that could also change the psychology of households.
Yeah, and that fundamental kind of, will the UK get out of the productivity slump that it's been in, not just since the financial crisis, but barely growing since COVID. AI looks like something that could shift the dial on that. But in the short term, we've got consumers and businesses holding back. And what can the Chancellor do today to kind of really boost people's confidence that her plans are stable, things aren't going to change, and they can start to invest?
I mean, would it be too soon for her? I mean, I'm not talking about reversal, but change to some of the things that she's announced to maybe support some of the smaller businesses more?
I mean, I think we've had a lot of chop and change, haven't we? So I actually have some sympathy for her trying to keep things on an even keel, and I think business too will appreciate in the end that. But there are definitely things that I would change. So on youth minimum wage rates, for example, those are currently due to kind of accelerate towards the rate for adult rates. When youth unemployment is rising, I don't think that's the right thing to do.
I mean, we've been covering extensively, of course, the Middle East and all of the uncertainty in geopolitics. Yeah. Does it mean that CEOs and households actually hold back just because there's so much, you know, concerning news out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons we've seen this lack of consumer confidence is because when you have an inflation shock, it has this scarring effect on consumers, on their attitude.
Extensively, of course, the Middle East and all of the uncertainty in geopolitics. Yeah. Does it mean that CEOs and households actually hold back just because there's so much, you know, concerning news out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons we've seen this lack of consumer confidence is because when you have an inflation shock, it has this scarring effect on consumers, on their attitude.
Extensively, of course, the Middle East and all of the uncertainty in geopolitics. Yeah. Does it mean that CEOs and households actually hold back just because there's so much, you know, concerning news out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons we've seen this lack of, you know, play a role in boosting that confidence in reducing unemployment, but a shock of this kind will absolutely limit their ability to do that.
Ruth, thank you so much for joining us. Ruth Curtis there, Chief Executive of the Resolution Fund. Now we'll have special coverage of the Chancellor's spring statement from around midday UK time, and coming up, more analysis on the US-Iran conflict. We'll also be joined by a former German ambassador to the US and the chair of the Munich Security Conference. This is Bloomberg.
Crises, two essential crises, and for both it's now or never: democracy and climate, and they are absolutely interlinked, and we have to solve them together. We're losing the democratic infrastructure and norms to deal with the climate, and we're losing the climate stability that is essential for a democracy. We have to solve them together. We've never faced a threat like this to our democracy at a time when it's a perfect storm, at a time when we're being told by climate scientists, some of you may be in this room, that we have to cut our emissions, fossil fuel emissions, in half in 5 years now. You know, when I started to realize what was happening, it was 12 years, and we haven't done it.
The Middle East and Africa regions are home to some of the biggest deals and fastest growth in the world. Vibrant resources and high-yield investment opportunities abound. I'm Jumana Versace. Join me on Bloomberg Horizon's Middle East and Africa for the stories, newsmakers, and insights shaping the decisions of traders across this exciting region.
You had heightened levels of volatility.
There's still room to maneuver.
Reduce the opportunities.
It allows you to increase significantly your net income.
Every trading day, only on Bloomberg.
The countdown is on. Everything you need to get the edge at the end of the market day. Get ahead of tomorrow's trading with The Close. Weekdays on Bloomberg. Context changes everything. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, only on Bloomberg.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to The Pulse. I'm Francine Lacqua here in London, and these are your top stories. Middle East allies call on the U.S. to end the conflict in Iran quickly. President Trump says it will go on for as long as it takes. Iran strikes back, targeting energy infrastructure. Saudi Arabia halts operations at its largest oil refinery after a drone strike nearby. Brent crude tops $80 a barrel, and European gas spikes again after Qatar closes the world's largest LNG export facility. So France is also planning a boost to its nuclear arsenal in a major realignment of Europe's defense structure. President Emmanuel Macron says Europe needs to take more responsibility for its own security.
I have ordered an increase in the number of nuclear warheads in our arsenal. And to prevent speculation, we will no longer disclose any figures about our nuclear arsenal, unlike what we may have done in the past. Those who would dare to attack France know the unbearable price they would have to pay.
Well, joining us now from Berlin is Wolfgang Ischinger, former German ambassador to the United States, also chairman, of course, at the Munich Security Conference. Professor Ischinger, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, no one was really expecting, as we left the Munich Security Conference, to have such a huge war that seems to be spreading. First of all, is now the time for Europe really to think about, to have a nuclear deterrent? Because there are voices, especially in Germany, that are not fully aligned. And if not now, getting together, when? Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I think that Emmanuel Macron's offer to start talking about strengthening the European component of nuclear deterrence is a good idea. It's a timely idea. Actually, it's an overdue idea. In 2020, he raised it in my presence at the Munich Security Conference. That's 6 years ago. And I think we should have started talking about what could happen, how could Europe strengthen its own contribution to nuclear deterrence, provided so far primarily or almost exclusively by the United States with respect to the European allies. So I think this is a good idea. It's very important that everything that we're going to be doing, discussing with our French partners, is going to be done in total transparency with the United States. We don't want to lose the solid support and coordination with the United States, which has provided extended nuclear deterrence now for half a century.
But, Professor, I mean, what's the way forward, first of all, in the Middle East right now? So we'll get on to Europe in a second. But when President Trump says, look, it'll take whatever it takes, what does that mean? How much further can this escalate, and how many countries will be drawn into this war?
Well, first of all, I think there is, of course, the good news. I hope the possible good news is that the Iranian people are being offered a chance, an opportunity to free themselves from a regime which has been really quite terribly murderous, especially in recent time. The not so good news is that many of us here in Europe are not sure that there is a good enough plan how to make sure that this is not going to end, as you just said, in an extended kind of warfare, in extended bombing campaigns. Let me put it this way. The goal of this operation should be to tell the Iranian people, we are with you. And our military campaign is not directed at you or against you. It's directed against these murderous leaders, and only against them. In other words, you are our friends, and we want to work with you. I hope that message can be made, and I hope that message can come across in a credible manner to the 90 million or so Iranians who are waiting for their freedom after half a century of religious repression.
But Ambassador, it doesn't seem that it's going this way, right? This has an end, but it's unclear what the U.S. is thinking. I mean, if there's a change in leadership, I mean, these, are leaders that have been at the top for a long time with still the royal guards that are armed. So what's the plan for the next day, and what role can Europe, if anything, or China play in trying to see a next day, and exactly how everyone can help the people of Iran?
Well, let me offer one critical remark. I think it is not, the best approach, the one selected, the one chosen by the Trump administration, along with the Israelis, to start this on their own. I think it would have been a good idea to discuss this beforehand with European allies, with others in the region, including Turkey and others. The concern that this may lead to an extended military campaign over many weeks, maybe months, and that the end result may not be, as President Trump put it, a peaceful rearrangement in the entire Middle East. That concern is widespread, not only in the region, but also here in Europe. So all we can do at this moment is hope that at least some of the revolutionary guards, some of the military leaders in Iran may actually decide not to shoot at their own population, at their own citizens anymore, and may try to support the creation of a more moderate, more Western-oriented, less religiously conservative future leadership.
Ambassador, China's critical in all of this, and you had, some from the very top of the Chinese leadership speak at the Munich Security Conference. What do you think their role in this is? So far, they've just urged all sides to be careful in the Strait of Hormuz. Can they play a bigger role diplomatically?
Well, I have not had a chance to talk to my Chinese friends, especially not to Foreign Minister Wang Yi. But what I assume is that they're deeply concerned about what's been going on. Look, the takeover of Venezuela, if one wants to call it that, and the intended changes in Iran could mean, at least from a Chinese perspective, that in the future, America is going to have a say in to whom is Venezuela going to sell oil, and to whom is Iran going to sell oil. And in both cases, China has been the major buyer of huge quantities of oil. In other words, from a Chinese perspective, America is going to have a say in to whom is Venezuela going to sell oil, and to whom is Iran going to sell oil. And in both cases, China has been the major buyer of huge quantities of oil. In other words, from a Chinese perspective, America is going to have a say in to whom is Venezuela going to sell oil, and to whom is Iran going to sell oil.
To get Ukraine, or whether that scares them off a bit. I don't know. If everything is linked, what kind of impact could this have on the Ukraine war?
Well, look, I mean, if the Trump administration were to show the same determination to offer, military threats. If diplomatic solutions are not forthcoming, then maybe a solution to the Ukraine conflict could be imagined within the next few months. I have not yet seen that kind of U.S. pressure against the Russian Federation. If diplomatic solutions are not forthcoming, then maybe a solution to the Ukraine conflict could be imagined within the next few months. I have not yet seen that kind of U.S. pressure against the Russian Federation. If diplomatic solutions are not forthcoming, then maybe a solution to
Donald Trump confirming that the US has launched major combat operations against Iran. He put up this 8-minute video on Truth Social in which he said Tehran's menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas and our allies throughout the world. He said, for 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed. He said it's been mass terror and we're not going to take it any longer. He said that America was going to destroy Iran's missiles, annihilate their navy, and he also said that while steps had been taken to avoid casualties, Americans may be lost. He called on the Islamic Revolutionary Guard to lay down their arms or face certain death. And he also addressed the people of Iran, saying the hour of your freedom is at hand. Let's bring in Deborah Haynes, our Defence and Security Editor, who was listening to that dramatic statement from the American president. Deborah, what did you make of it? The Islamic Revolutionary Guard to lay down their arms.
Well, I mean, he's been very clear about the objectives, and they are huge in terms of what he hopes to achieve from this operation. Describing it as major combat operations really does confirm what we were saying earlier about the scale of this attack and how it differs from the previous time that Donald Trump decided to strike Iran. This is clearly not just some limited operation, given what Donald Trump has now set out. He's not saying there's going to be regime change, but he is making very clear that the military action that the US is taking is designed to destroy the regime effectively. And that's why he's making that call to the Iranian people, saying that for them, this is a once in a many generation time to step up and take control. So that does signal that he doesn't see the US playing a role in whatever comes next.